¿Qué onda, mi gente? Today we're going to talk about the Aztec Empire and the legacy that it has left on Spanish today. I made a video the other day about some of the words that Aztec Nahuatl has left in Spanish, specifically in Mexico Spanish, all the cool words that it's left. And after doing so, I started to do a little research into the Aztec Empire, and so I thought it would be cool to share some of the things I learned with you guys. So without further ado, let's get into it. The Aztec civilization was at its peak from like 1300 to the early 1500s when it had its capital of Tenochtitlan in what is now current day Mexico City, right? And so the Aztec Empire, kind of like the Romans, was organized into city-states called Altepetl, which would then go around and form alliances with other city-states in order to make better conquests, right? And so the Aztec Federation refers to the group of three that joined together based around Mexico City, right? Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlalcopan. Aztec Empire was known for the cultivation of maize, huge kind of division they had between nobility and common folk, as well as having a pantheon of deities to which are still referenced today, such as Quetzalcoatl, Tlaloc, and Huitzilopochtli. So Huitzilopochtli was the Aztec sun god. He was also the god of war. It was particularly linked with Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire. So this empire was founded, this coalition was founded in the Valley of Mexico, and Tenochtitlan eventually became the one who took on the leading role, and the other two kind of took a back seat, right? And the Aztec Empire expanded both through military conquest as well as trade. And it controlled these newly conquered lands by not through military might and installing armies, but by putting favorable leaders into positions of power, people who would side with them and help them out. And this empire extended from the Valley of Mexico all the way down into Guatemala. And so when the Spanish arrived, Hernan Cortez arrived in what is now Veracruz, and he began to align himself with the other Aztec city-states that were available at the time, specifically the Tlaxcalteca, which is related to the present-day state of Tlaxcala. And I think this is part of the reason why the Mexicans jokingly say that Tlaxcala doesn't exist. It's a long-held anger with that group for having sided with Cortez and helped bring about the fall of the Aztec Empire. So on August 13th, 1521, Tenochtitlan fell. The Emperor Cuauhtemoc was captured, and the city of Mexico City was founded on the ruins of this empire. However, Cortez took advantage of the trade routes and their network that they had in order to continue to rule the local populations. And they did this by having the nobles essentially convert to Catholicism and pledge loyalty to the Spanish crown in exchange for being recognized as nobility and continuing to be able to rule. So let's talk a little bit about how they originally got there. So originally, the legend goes, they're originally from the northwest of Mexico, but where exactly is kind of lost to history. Nobody really knows exactly where. They migrated with other tribes like the Tlaxcalteca that eventually betrayed them before being told by their deity Huitzilopochtli to split off and take on the name of the Mexica. And when they arrived to the Valley of Mexico, there was already a bunch of other city-states there, the Colhuacan y the Azcapotzalco. But the Mexica eventually kicked them out, right? And according to the legend, when they showed up, the Mexica were shown this vision of an eagle perched on a cactus with a snake in its beak, right? And this, to them, indicated the location where they should found their great empire, which for them happened to be in a swampy island in the lake of Texcoco. This image, this symbol, is actually found in the Mexico's flag. This eagle sitting on a cactus eating a snake. It's kind of like their national symbol. Right? So throughout history, the Aztecs had a ton of different leaders, and I want to go into a few of them. The first one being Moctezuma, right? He came to power in 1440, right? And oftentimes when a new leader came in, the provinces and the cities that were underneath them would often try and rebel, right? They didn't want to continue to pay taxes, continue to pay tribute. And so whenever a new leader kind of came in, started off with a coronation campaign in order to take down these rebellious provinces, demonstrate their strength, and make sure that everything was good in their empire, right? Before going on to make conquest. So this guy ended up conquering a bunch of cities in the Valley of Morelos and Guerrero outside of the Valley of Mexico, and also undertook campaigns in northern Veracruz and in the Mixteco region of Oaxaca. So after this, we have this guy named Axayactl, right? And he is known for having undertaking campaigns against the Zapotecs. So the Aztec Empire has just continued to expand and it made its way down all the way to the isthmus of Tehuantepec, which is actually, funnily enough, kind of close to where I live. Right? Took over parts of Central Guerrero, areas around Puebla, fought against the Otomi, and then went on to take down the powerful Tarascan state in Michoacan. Then we have a short little empire running for about 4 years by Tizoc, who was his brother of the guy before. He just kind of got his butt kicked. He lost a bunch of major battles. A lot of cities rebelled, and that was how he spent most of his time, was trying to put down these rebellions, trying to make sure that the empire that had been constructed did just completely fall to pieces. He was only in power for 4 years, and then he suddenly mysteriously died. After this, we have Ahuitzotl, who was the brother of the last two, and was a war leader under Tizoc. His major campaigns included against the Toluca Valley, as well as the northern parts of the Valley of Mexico. And he's the one who began the enlargement of the Temple of Tenochtitlan in 1487. And for the for the inauguration ceremony, the Mexica invited a bunch of rulers from all over their subject cities who participated in spectators. And there's some figures, probably highly exaggerated, that up to 80,000 prisoners were sacrificed over 4 days in the inauguration of this new temple. Right? And last but not least, we have Moctezuma, right? And so he began his rule in standard fashion, coronation campaign, took over a bunch of places. He attacked the city of Nopayan in Oaxaca, and just continued to expand the Aztec. He also did things a little bit closer to home. He consolidated the two classes, right, making it much harder for peasants to become nobility through combat, which is the way they had gotten it beforehand. He also imposed like strict limits on luxury goods and not allowing them to get into the hands of the common folk. Right? In 1517, he got the first news that Hernan Cortez had landed in the Gulf Coast, right? And he sent people out to greet them and make them feel welcome. And so on the 8th of November of 1519, Moctezuma II received Cortez and his troops and their Tlaxcalan allies south of Tenochtitlan. Right? He invited them in, told them to come hang out. And so during this time, there was an Aztec warrior group that destroyed a Spanish camp on the Gulf of Mexico. And Cortez basically told Moctezuma, hey, you gotta kill these guys. And so that's what he did. He took them out and basically gave away his power to Hernan Cortez. And at this point, the power kind of shifts towards the Spaniards. They have a lot more control of the area, and they kept Moctezuma as a prisoner in his palace. And as this power started to shift towards the Spaniards, they became increasingly unwelcome in the towns and cities where they had moved into. And in June of 1520, a bunch of hostilities broke out. There was a massacre in the Great Temple, and there was a major uprising of the Mexica against the Spanish, right? And during this fighting, Moctezuma was killed, either by the Spaniards, who killed him before they fled the city, or by the Mexica themselves after the fact, thinking him as a traitor, thinking that he was a traitor. So after the siege and destruction of the Aztec capital, Cuauhtemoc took over, and he was captured in August 13th of 1521, the fall of Tenochtitlan. They held him captive for a couple years, and then he died supposedly during an ill-fated expedition to Oaxaca. The highest class in Aztec society were the nobility, right? And being nobility, which was only about 5% of the population, came with it a bunch of perks, right? They were able to get access to luxury goods. They were able to own land. They were able to direct labor of the commoners, right? And the most powerful of them had these huge estates that they controlled, and they also oftentimes served in higher government positions or as military leaders. And then the second class was the commoner or peasant class. This included people involved in agriculture and food production, as well as other types of people like warriors, artisans, and traders. And eventually, by the time of the end of the empire and the fall of the Aztecs, most of them were dedicated to this. Only about 20% was dedicated to food and agriculture, and the rest was dedicated to artisans, to warriors, to traders, right? Some kind of craft. What were the Altepetl, the city-states? Each of these groups was led by a ruler, a Tlalohctani, who had an authority over both the nobility and the commoners. And they served as like the capital of these city-states, right? Where for religion, they were like hubs of distribution. They were in control of the various little settlements that were spread out all over the place. And so these city-states were oftentimes not consisting of people who spoke the same language, but rather people living in the same area who oftentimes spoke different languages. Like most Mesoamerican peoples, the Aztec was organized around maize production. When they settled in the Valley of Mexico, it was filled with lakes and swamps. And so what they did was they built what are called chinampas, which chinampas are human-made little islands that they put in the lakes. They built them up from the bottom. They made them out of alternating layers of mud and plant material until they had like this little island on which they could grow all their food. They also had access to water. Then they would use canoes, kayaks, things like that to get between them through the channels. So there were 4 main deities worshipped by the Aztecs. Tlaloc, the god of rain and the storms. There's Quetzalcoatl, which was like a feathered serpent god. Huitzilopochtli, which is like a sun and war god. And there's Tezcatlipoca, right, who's a god of the night, magic, prophecy, and fate. And the temple in Tenochtitlan had 2 shrines at the top. One to Tlaloc, the god of the rain, and one to Huitzilopochtli, their creator god, essentially. That is the reason why they ended up in the Valley of Mexico. And anytime we talk about deities, we have to talk about sacrifice, right? Which sacrifice in Aztec culture was a huge thing, ritual sacrifice, where they would have festivals and parties and dedications to the very different gods would offer human sacrifice. And the reason they did this was they believed that death was instrumental in the process of creation. You can't create something without something else dying. And both gods and humans had the responsibility to engage in the sacrifice in order to continue and help life to proceed. Both animals and people were sacrificed depending on the god and what they were trying to do. And some of these acts of sacrifice even included ritual acts of cannibalism. In fact, there's a funny story I heard on a podcast about how they sacrificed people and offered it to the Spaniards, and that may or may not have been the reason one of these kind of tiffs started, due to having tricked them into eating human flesh. The Aztecs, with their language of Nahuatl and the great reach they had in Mexico and parts of Mesoamerica, has left tons of Nahuatl words, which is still spoken. Nahuatl is still spoken nowadays by a huge portion of people around the Valley of Mexico, right? Especially the small towns, pueblos. Right? And it has left a ton of words specifically related to animals that are native to this area, as well as food, right? And now a lot of the animals also have a standard Spanish variant, right? So first up, we have the ajolotl, right? Which the ajolotl is this little salamander that lives in the chinampas around Mexico City, that doesn't really grow up. It's like Peter Pan, right? It's stuck in this like in-between stage between being a baby and becoming a full adult salamander, right? And when it's there in the chinampas, it never really makes it past that. There are ways in which you can get it to mature and grow and become a real life salamander. We also have this little furry creature called a cacahuate. I think these things are super cute. I've never seen one, but they are really. Then we have chapulín. A chapulín, or a saltamontes in more common Spanish, is going to be a grasshopper. And chapulines, especially in Oaxaca where I live, are kind of like a little delicacy. They're eaten as like table fare, kind of like how we serve peanuts or potato chips at a bar in the States. You might get a little thing of chapulines when you order a beer at a bar. You might be able to add them onto a burrito or onto some food, right? Tacos, things like that. We also have a coyote, right? And coyote originally referred to the animal, nowadays used in reference to like human trafficking. Then we have the tecolote. You'll find this all over the place. There's a Playa del Tecolote here, close to where I live in Puerto Escondido, a little farther south. I didn't know what this word meant until I looked up for this video, but tecolote is actually just in normal Spanish a búho. Here they call it tecolote. We also have a tihuacal, again, a very common animal here, but not anywhere else. So this word might not be known anywhere else, but this is this cool little crab. We also have the tlalcoyote, or tejon in more common Spanish, which is going to be a badger. We have the xoloitzcuintli, which is the Mexican national dog, right? These hairless dogs that were used by the Aztecs, companions to all that long time ago. We also have the tlacuache, or the zarigüeya, which I actually had one of these fall into my back patio the other day, and I had to construct like this little maze to get this thing to run out without it disappearing into my house, which I was kind of scared of. I was also kind of terrified it was gonna like bite me or attack me, or that it was just gonna pass out, and I did not want to deal with that. So I like went out with a broom and tried to convince it to run around. We also have a guajolote, pavo, turkey, the huilota, paloma, in more common Spanish. Mapache, which mapache is understood kind of like aguacate, cacahuate in most Spanish dialects to mean a raccoon. You also have mayates, which are escarabejos verdes, green beetles. Moyotes, which are zancudos, mosquitoes. The osolote, which is like a small little jaguar looking thing. Zopilotes, vultures or buitres in more common Spanish. And the chichiquilote, which is more commonly referred to as a títere playero, and are those little whitish birds you see around along the beach. The other big place where they had a ton of influence was with food. A lot of the food, because when Spain came over, they brought it back, got taken with them, right? So that's why you see things like aguacate, cacahuate, camote, avocado, peanuts, or sweet potato, right? Which cacahuate is also called mani in a lot of other places. Patata or papa dulce, which is used in various places for camote. Cacao, chocolate, also comes from Nahuatl, as well as ejote and elote, which are judías verdes and maíz. Tomate, nopal, guacamole, which are found and understood most places. And then we have things that are very specific to Mexico, like huitlacoche, which is a flower that grows on cactuses, nanches, and then chicle, or goma de mascar. Thanks to everybody who watched that video. I got a bunch that I hadn't even thought of, right, that are very specific to Mexico, specifically a lot of dishes, right, like mixiote, which is made from meat, lamb, or chicken, wrapped in a little paper made from the agave plant, cooked in an underground oven. You have chilpayate, which is a type of sauce made from dried chilies, usually used as like a condiment for flavoring in dishes. Coconotzle, which is a sour cactus fruit. Atole and tamal, which are two very common breakfast foods. The atole being like a thick kind of milk-like substance, and then tamales being masa, corn dough, filled with various ingredients, some kind of meat generally, or veggies. The idea of the chinampas, these like artificial islands, is a word that's used today in reference to Mexico City. The word cuate, which is used a lot in Mexico City to mean friend or buddy, also comes from Nahuatl. Tecate, a type of woven mat or basket. And hule, which is rubber, right? Which is why when you're in Mexico, you'll see all these other things, like instead of a ferreteria, you'll see the tlalpareria. Instead of goma, you'll see hule. Then you have the escuintle, which is a word used to refer to a dog, and also in some places like a little kid. And mecate, which is a rope woven from traditional fibers, as well as the petate, that woven mat you see all over the place. And then last but not least, the word of apapacho or apapachar, which is quite literally means to hug with the soul, right? And is that like lovey feeling, hugs and sweetness that you get when you hug dear friends, loved ones. Thank you guys so much for listening to me talk about the Aztec Empire. This was a blast to record. If you guys have any questions about the Aztec Empire, or if you want to share something, be sure to do so down in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like, subscribe, do all that stuff. If you want to practice with some of what we just discussed today in this video, or leave comments, thoughts, opinions, do so down in the comments. I will get back to you. And if you want to learn about upcoming group classes or private classes, you can reach out via WhatsApp or email, and I will get you more information on that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next class.